What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So, before I get into this video, I want to give a big shout out to one of my newer subscribers for sending me a link to this old video, this old segment from the 2004 NBA Finals, which of course featured the Los Angeles Lakers and the Detroit Pistons. Ultimately, that finals was won 4-1 by the Detroit Pistons. Chauncey Billups was Finals MVP. Um, but this segment is not about really the Lakers or the Pistons. It's about Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James. And with them in this segment is Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. And you ask yourself, probably, why are they in this segment? Well, what gets forgotten is that at one point in time, the NBA was trying to push LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony as the new Magic and Larry. They were going to be the new rivalry to carry the NBA into the future. And why was the league doing this? Well, ratings were down. Okay, that's part of the problem. There was a mass exodus of NBA players that we had all grew up with, my generation. Remember, I'm the same. I'm just a little bit older than these dudes. At the time, I'm 23, so I'm not this old fuddy duddy. Bring me back Jordan. No, I'm not that much older than LeBron and Carmelo. I was 23 at the time. So at the but back then there were a lot of NBA players that we had grew up watching that retired. Clyde Drexler, Dominique Wilkins, Mark Price, Michael Jordan for a second and then third time, Patrick Ewing, Akeem Olajuwon, uh, David Robinson, Rick Smits, Sean Kemp by that time, Charles Barkley, John Stockton. Karl Malone was still playing, but he was playing in his final games, unbeknownst to all of us. Um, the list goes on, man. As far as players from the '80s that had retired by then, Eddie Johnson, Dale Ellis, Reggie Miller was in the last throes of his career. So the point is, all those guys had gone. So the NBA needed to promote and was pushing their stars of today and tomorrow. Now they did have stars. AI, Tracy McGrady, Shaq, Kobe, Vince. Now Vince was supposed to be that guy, but Vince didn't pan out. Now AI was a star, but AI was kind of controversial. You know what I'm saying? So AI was always going to have, he was always going to be the people's champ, but that global entity type star, that star that just swoons with endorsements and fans of all colors, races, creeds. They were looking for that Jordan type brand star. That was supposed to have been Kobe. But you got to remember, Kobe was in the throes of that trial at the time, which tarnished him. He lost a lot of endorsements. Um, Jail time was a serious possibility for Kobe. And the NBA was kind of moving away from him. Now, ultimately, Kobe would drudge. He would drudge back. He would earn the respect of people by his individual brilliance and go on to win 2 more championships. And the NBA would be all sudden, all is forgiven. We knew that bitch was lying. But at this time, they were pushing these two as the new Magic and Bird. They needed that rivalry. And remember, this was that 2003 draft, one of the greatest drafts in the history of the league. And at that time, you can make an argument. Some people thought Carmelo would potentially be better. Now, LeBron James was a high school phenom who had his games aired on subset ESPN channels and affiliates, right? But Carmelo had won a championship with Syracuse, fresh off a championship. And I'm gonna tell you something else that you'll notice if you're younger and you look at these interviews on this clip that's in the comment section, you'll notice that Carmelo is a lot more polished as a speaker. I'm not saying he's fucking, Barack Obama, but he's a lot more polished in his speech and public speaking and interviews than LeBron James was at that time. LeBron's gotten a lot better, but Carmelo was more polished. He looked like he could, the presentation. If you're part of a marketing, situation, you're like, okay, maybe Carmelo gonna be that guy. LeBron was gonna be the young kid to revitalize Cleveland. Carmelo was gonna be the young guy that was gonna revitalize. Well, Denver had never really been a huge force, but Denver Nugget fans had hope. Now, ultimately, LeBron was able to slowly but surely bring the Cleveland Cavaliers to respectability. In 2007, they went on that improbable run to the finals, but ultimately LeBron was failed in his first attempt, his first tenure there, I guess I should say, to bring a championship to Cleveland. But LeBron then, of course, would go to South Beach, go to 4 consecutive NBA Finals, winning 2, go back to Cleveland, win a championship, multiple final appearances, go to LA, win another championship, and the legend is there. Okay, the legend is there. Some people see him as the GOAT, least top 3, 4 player all time. If you look at the resume, his resume is just as great as, if not greater than any other player in the history of the league. What happened to Carmelo? Well, the problem with Carmelo is that, I think the media quickly realized that LeBron had the game and the endorsements that that they preferred. They were looking for someone as close to Jordan as possible. He wasn't Jordan, but they liked his more aerial assault type game. Carmelo was more smooth. Carmelo had a game that was a little bit more smooth, and sometimes that doesn't translate well to endorsements and all of that shit. And also Carmelo, even though his team went to the playoffs his first year, and you could argue he had better numbers, LeBron won Rookie of the Year. Carmelo also had to contend in a much more competitive, Western Conference. Much more competitive Western Conference. If it's not the Spurs with Tim Duncan, it's you know Kobe and Shaq the last year there with the Lakers. Later on, Gasol and Kobe. Then you had the rise of the Dallas Mavericks, Steve Nash's Phoenix Suns. You know, he would have to contend later on with the Deron Williams, AK-47, Carlos Boozer, Utah Jazz teams. Um, People may have forgotten about this guy already, whether it's Portland with LaMarcus Aldridge or Brandon Roy. That was going to be a great team until Brandon Roy had to retire prematurely. There was a lot of good teams, man. The Houston Rockets with Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming. So there was a lot of competition that they had to contend with. And, Carmelo was smooth. He put up a lot of good numbers. But the farthest he ever went was the Western Conference Finals. I think that was 2009. Went to the Knicks instead of joining forces with LeBron James. Maybe that could have changed, Carmelo's fortunes a little bit. But seeing how other players didn't get the same credit. Who knows? So Carmelo never won a championship. But things could have been different though. Things could have been a lot different if Joe Dumars had done what he was supposed to do. He was general manager of the Detroit Pistons and drafted him. He was supposed to be a Detroit Piston. If that had happened, we're talking a whole different story, y'all. We're talking a whole different ball game because Carmelo won a championship his rookie year. I'm certain they would have won it their second year, 2005. And when you consider that the Detroit Pistons won 64 games in 2006 with Carmelo on that roster, I can't help but think that the odds would have been very strong that the Detroit Pistons would have three-peated with Carmelo on that team. Now, a lot of people might say, well, Carmelo's game is different and Pistons is about sacrifice. Trust me, with strong personalities like Ben Wallace, Chauncey Billups, Rasheed Wallace, they would have gotten Carmelo to go with the program. I don't give a fuck if you this heralded rookie. You're gonna fit into our scheme, or you ain't gonna fucking be here. Well, I'm the star, man. Well, how about I beat your ass? Oh, okay, Ben. What you want me to do now? So, um, yeah. Now we're talking about Carmelo, 22 years old with three NBA championships. And now the narrative is different. Now it's more pressure on LeBron to win championships, more criticism. So, this is the thing. Does Carmelo changes his focus? Is his focus more on titles at this time? Maybe. Maybe he's more addicted to championships. Maybe he does join forces with LeBron in Miami, wins an additional two, three titles. Now he has five or possibly six titles. And now we're looking at Carmelo totally different. Totally different. I mean, he might not have as many points, but we're looking at him totally different. He's a winner. Because remember, Carmelo is one of the great clutch. Even though people don't realize this, statistically, Carmelo is one of the great clutch performers in history of the NBA. You know, there was a stat that shocked me. Even though Kobe had this reputation for being this great clutch performer, it was actually Carmelo that had the highest percentage of made shots within the 2 minute span. I remember that they was doing some league wide stat, and it was actually Carmelo who was number one. And if you look at Carmelo this year, you look at Carmelo over the last couple of years, he does have this reputation being a clutch guy. So yeah, the whole narrative could be different with Carmelo Anthony. And this video is proof that they were trying to push both of these guys as Magic and Bird. And if that's the case, that proves to you that Carmelo had that ability. He's always had that ability. To me, it's just one guy was much more lucky to stay healthy for an unprecedented amount of time than LeBron James. Another guy, he stayed healthy, but just not to that same extent. Um, and plus, we all remember what the league, what the media, excuse me, and the league did to Carmelo a couple years ago, convinced that he was done. You know, and I want to add this: there's a lot of people in the media who are LeBron fans who remember the shit that I'm talking about from years ago when they were supposed to be competitors, and they've had a grudge against Carmelo, and therefore, um, they try to shit on him. They always talked about how he didn't play defense. Something you always heard attached to Carmelo. You know, even though you look at LeBron the last few years and there's not much consistent defense from him as well. But anyway, that's all I got to say. Tell me what you guys think.